Welcome to the Mind Spark, bringing you the latest news from around the world. The global economy is holding its breath. Today is July 11th, 2025, and a trade war is brewing between the United States and Canada, two nations with the world's longest undefended border. The Trump administration has imposed steep tariffs on Canadian goods, citing national security and trade imbalances, plunging Canada into an economic crisis. Prime Minister Mark Carney faces a historic choice: retaliate, de-escalate, or accelerate Canada's long-discussed pivot to Asia. The world is watching. Over 20 other nations have received similar tariff threats from Washington, making this standoff a test case for global trade. Can Canada untangle itself from its deep integration with the US and build new bridges across the Pacific? The answer will redefine Canada's place in the 21st century and offer crucial lessons for countries navigating an unpredictable geopolitical landscape. This is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the search for stability in a rapidly changing world. For decades, the US and Canada have shared one of the world's most integrated economic relationships, formalized by NAFTA and earlier trade agreements. Over $760 billion in goods and services crossed the border in 2024 alone. Energy has always been the cornerstone. Over 98% of Canada's crude oil exports flow south to American refineries. This deep integration brought prosperity, but also created a dangerous dependency. Canada's entire energy export infrastructure was built on the assumption of a stable US partnership. As political winds shifted in Washington, this reliance became a liability. In 2024, Canada posted a $63.3 billion trade surplus with the US, driven overwhelmingly by oil. This single-customer, single-product focus is now Canada's Achilles heel. The risks of over-reliance went largely unnoticed, until the current tariff storm threatened to upend the foundation of the relationship. Now, Canada must confront the vulnerabilities of its economic model. The trade crisis has been building since early 2025. On January 20th, the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods and 10% on energy imports. In April, Prime Minister Mark Carney's new government took office, vowing to reduce dependence on the US under pressure. Canada withdrew its planned digital services tax targeting US tech giants, a major concession. But the tariffs only escalated. On July 10th, the US raised tariffs to 35%, threatening 40% if no new deal is reached by August 1st. The White House cited everything from trade imbalances to fentanyl smuggling, despite scant evidence. Canada is scrambling for a diplomatic solution, but has threatened counter-duties if talks fail. The relationship is at its lowest point in modern history. A century of partnership has become a battlefield of tariffs and threats. The economic pain in Canada is immediate and severe. Between May 2024 and May 2025, Canadian exports to the US fell 15%, a $7.7 billion loss in a single month. Efforts to diversify have seen exports to the rest of the world rise by 42%, but the gains don't offset the losses. Canada's reliance on the US market is stark and difficult to replace. Unusual trade patterns have emerged. For a brief period, the UK overtook China as Canada's second-largest export market, driven by a spike in gold exports. But this is no long-term solution. The tariffs have exposed the fragility of Canada's economic model and forced a national reckoning. The government's pivot to Asia is now a matter of economic survival. New trade deals, infrastructure, and a shift in mindset are urgently needed. Canada stands at a crossroads, compelled to change by crisis. The tariffs are backfiring in the US, inflicting pain on American consumers and industries. Regions like the Midwest and New England, reliant on Canadian energy, are seeing higher costs for gasoline and heating. US refineries built to process Canadian crude face squeezed margins and reduced competitiveness. Minnesota's mining sector is hit by surging electricity costs, threatening jobs. The rising cost of living is becoming a potent political issue, with Democrats blaming the administration's trade policies for inflation. The message is clear: tariffs on Canada are a tax on American families. Small business confidence is falling as supply chains are disrupted and costs rise. Major brands warn of price hikes for consumers. In a globalized world, trade barriers are a blunt instrument, hurting businesses and families far from Washington. The political fallout is growing, pressuring the administration from within. The costs of the trade war are being felt on both sides of the border. With the US market now unreliable, Canada is urgently pivoting west. The goal: redirect energy exports to Asia's booming economies, China, India, Japan. Prime Minister Carney frames this as a matter of sovereignty and economic survival. Asian markets pay global prices, often higher than the US discount, promising greater revenues and resilience. Success means forging new trade agreements, building diplomatic ties, and positioning Canada as a stable energy supplier. But the challenges are immense. Canada's infrastructure was built for north-south trade. Shifting to an east-west axis is a monumental task. New pipelines, expanded ports, and overcoming political, environmental, and social obstacles are all required. The dream of Asian markets is real, but the path is long and fraught with difficulty. Infrastructure is Canada's biggest obstacle to a Western pivot. Nearly all pipelines run south. Exporting oil to Asia requires new routes to the Pacific. The Trans-Mountain Pipeline expansion, a decade in the making and 6 times over budget, is just a start. Its capacity is a drop in the bucket compared to Canada's export needs. New projects face fierce opposition from environmental groups, Indigenous communities, and divided public opinion. Even with political will, building new pipelines takes years, far too slow for an immediate crisis. The urgent need for diversification is colliding with the slow reality of infrastructure. Canada's escape from US dependence is a marathon, not a sprint. Trade experts agree. The US-Canada relationship has changed for good. The old assumption of stable, open access to the US market is gone. Political risk is now a key factor for Canadian businesses. Investment is slowing as uncertainty poisons confidence on both sides of the border. The dispute signals a global trend toward protectionism and deglobalization. The weaponization of trade policy risks a cycle of retaliation and global economic fragmentation. Yet, some see a silver lining. This crisis could finally push Canada to diversify and globalize its trade. The future is uncertain, but North American trade will never be the same. The US-Canada trade dispute is a defining moment for global commerce. Even the closest alliances are vulnerable to economic nationalism and shifting geopolitics. Canada faces immense challenges: new infrastructure, new alliances, and a fundamental economic transformation. Yet this crisis is also an opportunity for Canada to move from dependence to strategic independence. For the US, the risk is alienating its most reliable partner and disrupting its own economy. Tariffs are a sledgehammer, inflicting pain at home and abroad. The global landscape is shifting. Adaptation and innovation are now essential. As Canada pivots west, the world watches for lessons in resilience. The era of easy friendships may be over, but the need for stability and prosperity endures.